Assalamu alaikum. You're listening to the New Beginnings podcast. No fluff, no holding back, just honest conversations about your journey as a new Muslim.
Brought to you by New Beginnings, a platform that aims to support new Muslims on their journey through Islam, from the Shahada and beyond.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to all our listeners. I'm Amanda. This is the New Beginnings podcast. And I'm joined today, as always, by our co-host, Sheikh Bilal.
Assalamu alaikum. Hello once again. Today's topic is all about what happens to our relationships with our families, partners, and especially our parents when we convert to Islam.
And today's guests, we have Brother Hamza and Sister Hanan. Brother Hamza, where are you joining us from this evening?
Assalamu alaikum. I'm actually based in Horwich in Bolton.
Okay, welcome. And we also have Sister Hanan. And Sister Hanan, some of you might remember from our first season Do's and Don'ts episode. Hanan, where are you joining us from today?
From Cardiff in Wales.
Brilliant, welcome.
So before we get into our main topic, we'd like to ask our guests to tell us more about themselves. So Sister Hanan, would you like to start?
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. Sorry, I didn't say that before. So I'm originally from Cornwall. And I converted in 1994 when I was living in Wales. So I'd moved to Cardiff in 1990. In fact, yeah. And coming to Cardiff, it was really nice. It was a small, it's a small city. It's very friendly. It's very multicultural, and I felt very welcomed here, being a fellow Celt. And I really knew no Muslims before. And then I started to have some very good friends working with people. Yeah, I just started to learn more, read more. I was kind of on a searching, I was on a journey, as I've heard in some of your other podcasts. People are either from quite a religious background already, or they're not. They're just completely not believing, and I was of that ilk, really. But when I'd seen these friends of mine who were, they were practicing sometimes, but sometimes when they were very practicing, I wanted to know a bit more. I wanted to know what was where they were coming from. Yeah, so I started reading, which is obviously usually the best way, isn't it, to find something out, not the people around you. And then my travels then took me abroad, and I went to Palestine and Egypt for 3 months. And that obviously then, that was another experience of and of itself. And then when I came back, then I converted. I would say eventually, it just felt like a long struggle. And it's really hard just talking just on a soliloquy like this. Please jump in and save
We'll put
me.
you out of your misery then, which is excellent for sharing with us.
Oh, yeah,
Brother Hamza, could we hear a bit about your story, please?
Yeah, so I was brought up I lived in Oldham, same town as Brother Bilal as well. I've been Muslim now for about 20 years. I'm 41 years old now, so I converted about 20 years ago. Yeah, I was involved. I mean, I'm a musician, I'm a singer-songwriter, so in my teenage years, I was very much involved in music and performing, nightclubs and things like that. And then I actually met Brother Bilal, and we became good friends. And he taught me about Islam. And I said my Shahada with you as well, didn't I, Bilal?
You did.
Yeah, there was no grand mosque for me with hundreds of people, cheering, and I said my Shahada in Oldham bus station. So I was with Brother Bilal and another friend of mine, friend of ours. It was very exciting time for me. If you'd asked me, or if you'd have told me a few years ago that I would have become Muslim, I would never have believed. I would never have believed you. But I've always believed in God, and I suppose for me personally, I just wanted to get closer to God. And this was my path. I didn't know it was Islam. I didn't know it was Allah. this is what happened to me. And
okay, mashallah. Well, jazakallah khair, both of you, for sharing your stories with us. Actually, Brother Hamza, when you said that you're a singer and a songwriter, you reminded me that back in the early 2000s, I think you had a very popular nasheed.
Yeah, there's a couple that are really popular. Your Beauty is a really popular song, possibly The Mountain as well. I was with Awakening Records, so I released an album with them. And also I've done work with Sami Yusuf as well and released an album with him as well. So it was a wonderful, wonderful time, yeah.
Excellent. So today's topic, let's get right into it. This is a topic that we have a lot of new Muslim brothers and sisters ask for advice about because they're struggling with it. And so we thought it would be beneficial to hear from our experiences, our success stories, hopefully, and our mistakes, of course, because I'm sure we've all made mistakes. So we're going to be talking specifically about our relationships with our non-Muslim families, our non-Muslim relatives, and especially our parents, and in some cases, partners, because some people come to Islam while already married, subhanAllah. So what we're going to do is just to ask a series of questions and we'll all discuss it from our various viewpoints. All of us, as Bilal said, mashallah, we've got a combined convert experience of over 80 years on this show at the moment, tabarakallah, 20 years each or something like that, mashallah. So the first question is, before you converted, how much interaction had your immediate family members had with Muslims? And what kind of views would you say they held about Muslims and by extension about Islam?
You know, because of where we were from, where my parents had always lived, Cornwall is not, or it's better now actually. It does have 2 masjids. I looked the other day, and they want to build a third. You know, they really didn't have any experience with Muslims. However, my sister had moved up here to Cardiff, and when you were saying about, you know, you were in clubs and things like that before Hamza, that was where we met. That's where I met all the Muslims that I knew in the club that I was working. And then my sister also worked in there. So, but we didn't have any frame of reference then. So that was it really. And certainly my grandparents were alive then. And again, nothing. So it did come a bit of a shock, you know, when suddenly somebody out of the blue just becomes Muslim, isn't it?
Well, what was their impression of Muslims and of Islam before you converted, before they met one?
I think for them, it was probably very, very strange and different, but I would have to ask them, actually. And it's something I haven't. They'd be quite happy to come on a podcast, I'm sure. We
should get them on. We should get your mum and dad on sometime, inshallah.
What was your view about Muslims and Islam?
It's strange, isn't it? Because I thought it was very odd that Muslims that I knew were practicing sometimes and then not other times. So in Ramadan, they wouldn't come out clubbing with me, but then afterwards they would. And obviously that doesn't make any sense. So you know, but then when I was in Egypt, in Palestine, the people were lovely, but I didn't think of them as being Muslim. I just saw them as being people, you know. But when I was in Egypt, I did notice that most of the men weren't very modest towards us. I remember there was one. I went to a bookshop and I wanted to buy a book on Islam in English, but obviously, you know, all the books were in Arabic. And I remember this one man who owned the bookshop was really excited that I wanted to find out about Islam, and he was really upset that he didn't have anything to give me. But his colleagues were all kind of like, they were making fun of him, saying that he wants to be someone who waits for his wife, you know, before he has relations. I don't know how we got onto that topic, but he seemed in the minority out of the people. So I didn't like how I was treated as a woman in Egypt, particularly. But alhamdulillah, I was a reader, and so I took my knowledge from books, not from people.
Brother Hamza, how about yourself? What was your family's, so say like your parents, your grandparents, siblings, what was their impression of Muslims and Islam before you decided to convert?
Yeah, I think with me being from Oldham, the majority of Muslims in Oldham are Pakistanis. So I suppose that's the way what they saw Islam as. My mum, she used to work at Habershaw School, and there was an Asian teacher there. And used to make nice curries. She used to enjoy the food that he made for her. But she said that he was a really nice person and he had really good manners. And I suppose that was the only thing that they saw of Islam. my father, I don't think he saw anything really. He didn't really interact with any Muslims at all.
And Bilal, you're from the same area, aren't you, originally? So you've spoken before on the podcast about your own friends, a lot of them being Muslim growing up. But what about your mum, your parents, your siblings? How did they view Muslims and Islam?
I think in a negative light, to be honest with you. Even now, my siblings who do view a lot of the Muslims from our area in a negative light, purely because of very poorly behaved, they're quite rude, and many of them they're into selling drugs or they try cheating people in business dealings. And my brother-in-law is like Christian now, he's from Jamaica, because these guys who keep preaching to me about Islam at work, but then they're all working and claiming benefits on the side, and you're boasting about it to me at work and stuff.
Oh no!
And I'm thinking, it's very, very bizarre behaviour. So that's the kind of perception that they probably had, to be honest with you.
That's really unfortunate, because it means that when somebody converts, then they've got a whole lot of work to undo all these negative perceptions.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's an uphill battle, isn't it? Hanan, when you were saying about the going to Egypt, before I converted, I went to Malaysia for a weekend, like a long weekend. And I'd been to Malaysia before, but I hadn't been sort of cognizant of the fact that the people were Muslim, because I didn't know anything about it. I had a very negative impression of Muslims. It was very much, sort of the whole, violent Arab on horseback trope. That was my impression of Muslims before I knew any. And then when I knew Muslims, they were all Malaysian and Indonesian, and they were absolutely lovely people. And I remember, though, going to Malaysia and being in a marketplace, and there was this guy selling like pictures with ayahs from the Quran and things like that written. And I was sort of curious. And so I asked him what one was, and he was explaining to me, that says that's this surah and that's that surah. I didn't know what surah meant. I had no idea what he was saying, but they were pretty, right? And then he said to me, are you interested in Islam? And I said, yeah, I've been looking into it. And then he said, and bearing in mind, I was very, very young at this time. And then he said to me, maybe I could take you for dinner sometime and I could teach you about Islam. I remember I just looked up and I went, I think that's something you're not supposed to do. I mean, I could be wrong, but it just reminded me of that, just this bizarre behavior. But yeah, my family's impression was really negative as well. And I think not because they had seen any bad behavior, but because they hadn't seen any Muslims. So all they knew was what was on the news. And of course, what did we get around that time? There had been the Iran-Iraq war. There had been the invasion of Kuwait. That was what we knew about the Muslim world, was countries fighting over oil. So, and of course, Israel-Palestine. And that gave a very negative view of Muslims as well, the way the news reported on it, subhanAllah. So yeah, definitely an uphill battle for all of us, it seems.
So the next thing is, how did you actually introduce your family to your conversion to Islam? And what kind of response did you get? How did they take it? So with my family, I didn't tell them. They actually found out from other people. And then, my mum says, why have you done that? And didn't really know what to say, to be honest with you. Didn't really have an explanation, but she was okay with it, really. And, when I met my dad, so my dad doesn't live with us. The first time I told my dad said, oh, you become Muslim. He said, oh, your brother's a Muslim. It's my elder brother, I don't live with him. But he said, yeah, he converted in prison. So my brother was in prison before me, and he accepted Islam before me. I didn't even know.
For a while, I kept it to myself. I really did not want to tell my parents at all. But I knew at some point that I had to. Fathers are a lot more difficult than the mums, I think. But yeah, I did speak with my mum and told her that I was Muslim, and she was just, oh right, okay. Not much of a response really, but yeah, I think she was okay with it. I was absolutely terrified to tell my dad. I remember one evening we were going out for the evening, and he was picking me up, but I was doing my prayers, and I was praying at work. So my dad said, I'll pick you up at 5:30 and then we'll go out. I said, okay, well, no, just pick me up at like 5:45. And he's like, well, why 5:45? I'm picking you up at 5:30. What's it? And I just thought, right, I'm just gonna let it out now, and I'll just tell him. So I just said, Dad, I need to pray. He said, you need to what? I said, I need to pray. And he was shocked, he was completely shocked. I said, Dad, I'm a Muslim. So that was that. And alhamdulillah, my parents have been really supportive, both my mum and dad. I mean, even my dad's even said to me, this religion, it has been a good thing for you because it's changed you for the better. You've got stability, you've got a family, and we can see all the good things that have come from it.
Alhamdulillah, that's really a blessing when your parents are happy with it. Hanan, what about you? How did you?
You know what? This is really difficult because I can't remember. It's so long ago, and because my brain's, and I don't know I don't think I blocked it out because I don't think it was bad, but I think I would have remembered that because I wasn't living with my parents, obviously, and I wasn't seeing them that regularly. Obviously, I was talking to them on the phone and that. I don't remember. The one person I do remember telling is it's just me and my sister, and she lived in Cardiff. So I said to her one day, I said, "Oh, at least I've become Muslim," and she went, "Oh yeah, great." That was it. She was so chilled about it, and I knew she would be, but I was a bit nervous telling her because it's weird saying it out loud, isn't it, to somebody, And I obviously would have had the conversation with my parents because the same thing, like Hamza said about having to pray one time, like when your parents come up and visit, and then you have to pray in front of them, or they sit. I remember the first time so I saw my parents came to my flat. They had never seen me in hijab because obviously I was inside, and then I remember putting it on and going outside, and that was so weird because I remember thinking what are they thinking? How do they feel? But we're British. We don't talk about these things, so I never asked. But I know that my mum was okay with my hijab, and my dad wasn't.
My dad was actually easier. I find it interesting that you've all said that your dads were the harder ones. My dad was really chill about it. And I've spoken about this before on other platforms, so, I don't think I need to repeat it here, but my dad was really chill. My mum was not. She was very upset. And my dad told my mum, I wasn't living with my parents at the time, and I'd gone out with my dad, but it was Ramadan, so I hadn't been eating. And so that's when I had told him. And he was so chill about it. And then he said to me, though, let me deal with your mum. He went home and told my mum, and she had an inkling because I had sort of done some very intentional actions like inviting them to a mosque open day and leaving booklets around the house when I would visit and stuff like that, just to sort of, and I remember my mum had said things to me like, "You're not going to convert to Islam, are you?" And I had sort of been like, don't worry about it, So she was really, really upset. But then my dad talked her down, and he said to her, you can make it a problem or you can not make it a problem, but you seem to be wanting to make it a problem right now. And that calmed her down, mashallah. But she still doesn't we've got a good relationship, but she hates the hijab. Absolutely. She would rather I never wear it. But the rest of it, she's okay with, and when my kids were little and they would come to visit, and sometimes I'd go out and my parents would be home with the kids, and they'd remind my kids, I think you've got to pray now and stuff like that. So, they did come around in that respect, they were very respectful of it. So alhamdulillah for that.
So the next question is, why did we choose to introduce our conversion in the way we did? What was our thought process at the time? So for me, I didn't introduce anything. It was other Muslims in the area with big gobs telling my family members that I've converted to Islam. And I haven't even told them yet, but they don't know what it was like for you guys. Maybe Hanan?
Well, again, I didn't really do anything consciously, but there's no way nobody could have told my parents because only my sister knew. And like I said, they lived far away. So I remember telling my sister, and the Albany Road post office, Amanda, you know where that is. I don't know why. I was out with her, and I just sort of thought, okay, let's just say it. And I just did. And that was it. But I really can't remember. I'll have to ask my parents, actually. I'm sorry, I should have done some homework before this show and asked them if they remember me telling them. But unfortunately, obviously, they're quite old now as well. So I doubt whether they remember. But I think prep is good. And I think my advice would be in the future would be to tell people to prepare the way, to pave the way, like Amanda leaving the leaflets dotted around.
The thing about the leaflets, though, is that it didn't really make any difference. They were still shocked. They were still surprised, even with all my hinting. And I think when I actually did tell them, I had a plan, right? I was going to leave all of these leaflets, and then they were supposed to start asking me questions about it. And then I was supposed to start answering their questions. And then I was going to explain to them how beautiful it was, and that this was something I wanted in my life, and that I was going to take Shahada on this date. And did they want to come along? I did none of that. I went along with my friend, did it by myself, basically. It was me and my friend in London Central Mosque, in Regent's Park Mosque. That was it. And then I just, told them, by the way, one afternoon at the start of Ramadan. And it was kind of like, it was completely what I hadn't planned and what I hadn't envisioned. And I don't know why I ended up doing that way, but I think it was really just fear of their reaction that made me do it that way, rather than doing things as I had planned, because they weren't asking me the questions. They weren't taking the bait, so to speak. So I ended up like just going ahead and doing it anyway without getting their pre-approval, which is very unlike me. But I think it was just, I wanted their approval and I could see that I wasn't going to get it, but I had to do it anyway. So then I thought, well, I'm just going to do it and tell them then afterwards. And I think that's although it was a subconscious thought process, but I think that's probably what it was. Brother Hamza, how about yourself?
To be fair, I didn't plan it at all. I didn't think, it just kind of happened that way. I think it's important. There's any converts out there at the moment, and the parents don't know, then I think it is important for them to know. I think Allah, wants them to know, and it's a test as well when you convert to Islam. So it's part of the test, I suppose. You're choosing Allah over everything else. It will be a shock. It was a shock to my parents, but it has to, settle with them, settle in the heart, and eventually they become more relaxed about it, and it takes time. But yeah, I'd advise that it's good to tell them.
What I find interesting is that all of us on this call, our parents were either we told our parents or they found out about it after we had converted. And their reactions were shock and surprise, but ultimately okay with it. Like, none of us got disowned, right? None of us got kicked out of our houses. None of us got physical threats or anything like that, which we do hear about, subhanAllah. But, so what you're saying, Brother Hamza, about it is good to tell people, yes, as long as you know that you can do so safely. Obviously, you do have to assess your own situation and your own family dynamic. But I'm always so impressed when I see, like recently, I think just over a year ago, there was a sister who, mashallah, when she decided she wanted to take her shahada, she said to me, I need to go home to visit my family to tell them what I'm going to do because I want them there when I do it. And they planned the whole thing. And her family, they're so lush, but they planned the whole thing. And her whole family came down to Cardiff on her birthday for her shahada. So she took her shahada on her birthday. And the whole, her parents, her step-parents, because her parents are divorced and remarried, her brothers, her sisters, her in-laws, like her sister's spouses and all of that. The whole clan was there, and it was so lovely, and they are so supportive. And I look at that and I think, subhanAllah, she really thought that out. But it's such a beautiful example. But then we see all of the other examples as well, don't we, of people being, quite verbally abused and things like that.
I suppose I have been very lucky. I've been very fortunate that my parents are so supportive. I think there was a friend of ours, wasn't the Bilal back in Oldham? He said when he converted, he was praying in his bedroom, and his dad came in and rugby tackled him to the ground while he was praying. Literally rugby tackled him to the ground. So yeah, you do have cases like that, and yeah, it is serious. So yeah, you're right, Amanda. It
really, really does, especially today, where we have so many people with really excessively negative impressions of Islam, and they probably might react worse.
We do have a podcast which is coming out of the closet. So there's some guidance on if people want to refer to that.
Yeah, one of the brothers on there had a really big struggle, didn't he, subhanAllah, with his family. But just moving on to our next topic, I think even for families who are supportive, which mashallah all of ours are, there will still be challenges. So what have been our biggest stumbling blocks with each of our families? With my family, there were two things. There was, first of all, hijab, which is, and always will be a stumbling block. And I think that's because my dad didn't mind it again. And my sister is really chill with it. She's bought me scarves for birthdays and holidays and stuff like that as gifts. My mom has too, but then she'll still complain about it. And I think that's her big thing. And I think it's probably because of her generation. She came through the generation post-war women's rights. So for her, me becoming Muslim in and of itself wasn't a problem, but wearing the hijab, she sees it as sort of taking a step backwards. But then when I got married and didn't change my surname, that to her was like, oh, like you don't have to take your surname. And I think she was relieved because my first husband's surname was really hard to pronounce. She was impressed by that part of it, but the hijab part of it, she really, that's probably the biggest thing. How about for you, Bilal? What was the biggest stumbling block for you, do you think?
didn't really have any. When I converted, I was living with my mum at the time. I was, 20 years old at the time, and they just let me get on with it, to be honest. I was already doing my own thing anyway.
But you were saying that they have a negative impression of Islam and Muslims from before you were Muslim, and you said they still hold those views.
Yeah, some of my close family members do in general.
Do they project that onto you, or is that just...
No, absolutely not. No, it's just like certain groups of Muslims. The most I've had is like some negative comments from uncles, or trying to challenge my beliefs, or them telling me that it's the wrong religion, and from family, it's not really been a problem. Generally, with Afro-Caribbean people, you will find that there are a few converts to Islam already in the family, so they're quite, accustomed to it, and you don't really get the same amount of antagonism.
Like you said, I mean, I've met so many converts from that community and people who've been Muslim a long, long time as well. So, like you said, there's more interaction, I guess. Yeah,
they're used to it because of culture. We have Malcolm X and the Black Panther movement, and obviously historical roots in Africa. So they're quite aware, and the music as well. A lot of the early hip hop culture.
Yeah, of course.
Speaking about Islam and Allah, and quite openly. So they're quite accustomed to Islam more than other communities, I would say.
Brother Hamza, what about with your family? What was the biggest stumbling block for you, do you think?
Again, the same with me as Bilal. No stumbling blocks, really. My parents have been really supportive. At the end of the day, they're your parents. You've got to respect them, and I think if you do respect them, then I think it'll be a lot easier. Don't get into arguments with them. Don't get into debate. Just be kind, and then they'll see the beauty of Islam coming through you. I think if you've got good manners, then it's important. I think you don't really come across any stumbling blocks.
Hanan, what about yourself? I have a theory. Listening to these answers, I have a theory about why these answers are how they are. But I want to hear what Hanan has to say first before I say it. So I might be wrong.
Okay, so mine's different because I feel like, reflecting on what you guys were saying, is that all the stumbling things, all the, the barriers, like, if you like, or the way you knock up next to somebody, was me. So I was quite extreme. So I didn't want to celebrate my children's birthdays, so I told them they couldn't celebrate my children's birthdays. I went through a phase of thinking that I couldn't eat mayonnaise because it had spirit vinegar in it. And, with my tiny, minuscule little pea of knowledge, I was giving huge fatwas on myself that was really difficult. So if I went out with them, I couldn't have a sandwich because all the sandwiches, tuna sandwiches and had mayonnaise in them. Can you imagine how ridiculous I seemed in Cornwall now? They've already like accepted the fact I don't eat pork. They didn't drink alcohol, and obviously I didn't drink. They were forcing alcohol down my neck. But I was making it very difficult for myself, and I didn't present the good face of Islam, really, of middle Islam. But it was the 90s, in my defence, and there was a lot of groups and leaflets and pamphlets going around the masjid, telling me that, I, couldn't do X, Y, and Z. And obviously that must have been really frightening. But, to be honest, that my parents dealt with it so good. I remember having one argument with my dad, and he said, they're my grandchildren, I can do what I want. And I said, well, no, they're my children. I, have the say. So there was very small things, and they were very, very good. And they still are, as you know, they're amazing. And now, subhanAllah, but my sister became Muslim, and then so her daughter's Muslim, and all my children and grandchildren. And so every single person in their family, other than their brothers and sisters, are Muslim. And so they spend Eid and everything with us. And it's really beautiful.
As converts, I think we do tend to be extreme when we first joined the religion. I remember going to my grandma's once, and I was sitting in the living room, and she poured herself a glass of wine. I got into an argument with her and said, you can't drink that in front of me. That's forbidden. And she was, obviously she got a backup because that's her home. I'm going into her home and I'm telling her she can't do what she wants to do in her own home. And I look back on it now and I think that was absolutely ridiculous. And I think as you grow through Islam, you develop more wisdom.
I think probably all of us have similar stories. When people are new, there's always that phase of being super strict and super literal. But in fairness, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Yeah, we can get people's backs up, and sometimes we do laugh lack wisdom, but sometimes we need to go through that. Like I went through that too. I went through a very, very literal phase, and I still am probably more literal than a lot of people I know. But at the same time, it's like I found comfort in that because I had come from a life of just utter chaos. And so having those literal black and white rules gave order and meaning to my life. But then after a time, yeah, it does get exhausting trying to navigate everything that's haram, because it seemed everything was haram. And then that's when I sort of realized that, okay, maybe this approach isn't the approach that I want to take. Definitely the wisdom part resonates. Gaining that wisdom, and that's something that you can't have that without experiencing it.
So on a previous episode about identity, we talked about code switching and how we may present different facets of our Muslim identity to our families than we do to our Muslim friends. Do you find yourselves doing anything like this? Have you ever compromised anything religiously for the sake of your family?
Yeah, it's funny because it is such a long time ago when you sort of like thinking back. But because I lived in Cardiff, which is very multicultural, and I wore abaya and hijab. But then when I went to Cornwall in, we're talking 90s now, it was very unusual to see a person of color, So me going down there like that, it was a bit of a culture shock. So I don't know if I did it for them, for my family, or whether I did it for myself, but I feel like I just toned it down a bit. So I still wore hijab, but I just wore it a bit differently. I can't really remember now quite how, or I wore like just long tops instead of wearing the abaya, and it did feel better. It felt easier. It felt like I didn't stand out, because sometimes it feels like that's not what it's about either. Is that the hijab is a covering, but it's not supposed to scream, like, hey there, I'm here, I've arrived, And I remember once down in Cornwall, I did get asked if I was a Bosnian refugee. Well, I didn't get asked actually. I got like it was like a something that was shouted at me. Yeah. But I thought actually it was probably one of the better ones because it was accurate. I was Muslim and I was European. So it was better than the P word and the other words that you get called. So yeah, I think that was about it really, is just toning down the dress. And I don't remember doing much. I think the code switching more comes in maybe in work situations. I mean, you even sort of do it now sometimes in a way. You don't mean to, but you're just a bit different in that setting. And I think you kind of have to be, don't you, to how you are with your friends. But I do sort of, even still now, you say alhamdulillah in conversation, with the AA man or the, whatever. And my kids look at me and go, Mom, but I can't stop it. I can't turn it off now. It's just there, isn't it? Yeah.
I think what you said about changing how you dress, which my parents used to come visit me. I used to live in Birmingham, and my parents used to come visit us there. And of course, in Birmingham, you can wear, like actual over-the-head jilbabs and niqabs, and nobody bats an eyelid because that's how half of the city dresses. But when I go to see my mom, like I feel I can't, not that I can't dress how I would normally dress, but that I don't feel comfortable. I feel too obvious dressing how I normally dress when I'm in my mom's city. So I do tone it down in the sense of I won't wear black. I won't wear like a batwing abaya. I won't wear something like that because it's just a little bit too much. Do you know what I mean? It's a little bit too flowy and too massive and too this, and I'll just wear like a maxi skirt and a blouse, which it's covering the same stuff that needs to be covered, but do you know what I mean? So in that sense, yeah, I'll do that, but I don't know if that's really like the same as compromising anything. I've never compromised in the sense of like doing something that was not permitted or questionable just to keep my parents happy. And I'm sure I've annoyed them in that respect. I remember one time my mum, when my older son, he was a baby, and my mum went to the chemist to buy baby food, those little jars of baby food that they have. And she brought something that had chicken in it. And I said, well, Mum, he can't eat that because it's not halal. And she was so annoyed because she was like, well, you have to eat halal, but he doesn't. He's just a baby. And I was like, I'm literally responsible for his well-being. If I feed him haram, I'm responsible on that. And she couldn't understand it because she was like, you're imposing your silly rules on your infant. She was already annoyed that I'd had him circumcised. That was already an annoyance. But it was like, then the fact that I was like feeding him halal food, which she saw as being something silly and unnecessary. And I was trying to explain it to her that like, no, but this is, we only want to put into our bodies what's wholesome. And I want to do the same for my child. So that was something that I actually did not compromise on, that I think she really kind of wishes that I had, but I really dug my heels in with that one. Bilal, what about yourself?
Nothing that comes to mind, to be honest with you. Like I said, I've always had the freedom to do whatever I want, and because I was already in a Muslim community, and my friends were Muslims already anyway, so it wasn't really like that for me. So I was quite open and free to practice, and didn't really have any difficult situations like that with my family. And even at family events, they always made everything halal anyway. All of the chicken was usually halal already anyway.
It already was before you were Muslim?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. How come? Just because of where you lived?
I think probably there were a few Muslims already in the family.
MashaAllah.
Extended family, and it was just like that. So there's there are many stories like that. So there was a Afro-Caribbean takeaway in Manchester. They didn't even know they were using halal meat. It's just like they were buying it from the halal butchers and using that meat.
SubhanAllah. Actually, now that you say that, I remember speaking. It's always the chicken, isn't it? I think it was last year. So this is like, I've been Muslim 25 years. So this is 24 years into being Muslim. And I was visiting my mum, and she came back from the supermarket with this huge tray of chicken legs. I mean, my mum doesn't eat that much. She's a tiny little woman. And I said to her, wow, that's a lot of chicken. And she was like, well, yeah, you're here visiting. And so I just went, oh, is it halal? She was so annoyed because it was like, oh, there's that word again. So it's like, until now, how many years later? But in fairness, she only sees me once a year. So it's easy for her to forget these days. But Brother Hamza, what about yourself?
Yeah, just thinking about the dress. I mean, when I first became Muslim, I liked wearing a Muslim hat. And I remember my dad coming round and saying, "You take off that stupid hat." At the time, I was like, I didn't want to take it off because it's part of my religion. But thinking about it now, it's not really compromising. I could have taken off the hat. My parents were really supportive with the halal. My mum, she bought halal chicken so we could have halal meals, especially when I got married and we brought the family around to their house. She used to go to Tesco and get a halal chicken for us, and, which was really nice. But I don't really think I've compromised the religion, anything in the religion at all.
So looking back, is there anything that you think you could have done differently to make it easier on your family to accept your conversion?
Oh, I'm exploding with this one. So many things. One, don't change your name. I do love Hanan now. I love the name Hanan. I can't go back to what it was. Well, my parents obviously still call me that, and my sister, but I just think that was so upsetting to them. And I, as a mother now, I know how I would feel if my child just suddenly came home and said, I want to be this name. I mean, there is a lot. There was a lot of things that at the beginning, like I said, I was quite extreme. I was quite fervent and, zealous. In fact, somebody actually said to me a few years ago, "Gosh, Hanan, you were quite scary and zealous there, which is not what you should be." But yeah, just really kind of realizing how hard it would be for them and preparing them, like we said earlier. I don't know quite how I would have done that because I didn't see them that often, and you couldn't sort of refer them to the internet or or YouTube, could you? You couldn't. But I just think keeping them more in the loop. But we didn't know, and so we didn't have the knowledge. So therefore, we can't really, obviously you're not supposed to say, if only I'd done this or if only I'd done that, because that's not really part of our faith. But in hindsight, we hope that going forward we help other converts, that we just tell them to be easy, to be kind, to be respectful, like Hamza said, and you can keep your name, which only Amanda here has. But my sister didn't change her name, and most people now don't seem to, do they?
It's something that I'm a big advocate of, that you should keep your original name, not change it. So there are a lot more converts now deciding not to. But like you said, the 90s.
Yeah.
It was the 90s.
See, the thing is, I even got married, and my parents didn't come, not even my sister. I had no one with me. I only had me and two random witnesses plucked out of the masjid. It must be so horrible for your parents to suddenly not be at their daughter's wedding. I mean, they came to my second one, so they were all there for that, and that was really nice. There's a lot of things that we could do differently.
What about you, Sheikh Bilal?
Definitely not change name, dress. I started, like Hamza, changing my style of dress as well. You didn't really need to. I'm overzealous in the initial stages in certain matters, and also really just trying to study instead of trying to figure things out on your own, but have a proper path of Islamic education and study with the right people from the beginning. I think that's important as well.
Brother Hamza, looking back, what would you have done differently if you could?
With the name change, I mean, I've got Hamza. Hanan, you're definitely right in what you're saying about the parents not liking the Muslim name. It's something that's very strange. It's not of the Western culture, so they're not familiar with that. My mum would never call me Hamza. She calls me Tom. I mean, I chose my name. I watched the video, The Message, when I was a teenager. Someone gave me a copy of the video, and I watched that. And who's this warrior who's riding in on on horseback, who wrestles lions, and his name's Hamza. And I thought, I like that name. I'm going to choose that name for myself. I'm Tom to my family, my mum, my dad, and my brother. I'll always be Tom. I won't be Hamza. To my Muslim friends, I'm Hamza. So I've got two names really. With as I mentioned, with my grandma, should have been a lot more respectful in that situation, and with my parents as well. This is the time to, if you're living in the home with your parents, this is the time for you to show good character. You can help your parents if they need any help in the home with anything. Help them, show them how it's changed your character. This is the best form of dawah. Parents, they know you more than anything, and they'll see that change in you. Be around them more, spend more time with them. You might not get that time again.
Yeah, that's very true. I agree with you all about the name thing. And I mean, although I've gone back to my own name, to like my birth name, I did take an Arabic name for a long time when I first converted. I think it impacts us a lot with our identities, and it impacts us a lot with how we deal with ourselves and how the community deals with us. And I think that the wider community as well, because more and more of us are keeping our names, our original names, they're getting more accustomed to it. So it's always a good thing. The thing about dress, though, is for sisters, we can't continue dressing how we dressed. We have to make changes to a degree. I mean, I shouldn't say we have to, obviously it's all done gradually, but eventually you're going to not be dressing the same way you were dressing when you were out in the clubs and stuff, with hijab and things. There is going to be a change. So that's always going to be a struggle. And I can't say that I would do that any differently. But I think one thing that I would definitely do differently to make it easier for my family would be maybe being a little bit more proactive in my sort of leaving books and leaflets around the house, maybe trying to trigger some discussions rather than just passively leaving them and hoping that they would ask me questions, because it might have helped them a bit if we had had a discussion about it before, rather than just smacking them with it that, oh, hey, by the way, I'm Muslim. Do you know what I mean? Now I'm mindful of time. So I'm going to ask each of you for one thing, one piece of advice. So we've got 3 categories here. a piece of advice for new converts struggling with these issues with their families, and a piece of advice for family members of converts who may be struggling, because who knows, they could be listening too. So let's start with the first one. One piece of advice to new converts who are struggling with their parents' non-acceptance of their conversion. Sheikh Bilal, head of New Beginnings, should have wonderful pearls of advice for all of our converts who are struggling.
I think they should obviously listen to podcasts like ours, first of all, and, be ready. Reach out to us if you're unsure about anything. Don't try and figure things out on your own. It's like we said, just on this panel, there's a wealth of experience. You can ask other people about their experiences and learn from that, so you don't make the same mistakes we made. Yeah, just reach out and speak to others, and don't make any rash decisions on your own. I think that's the best advice that you could give.
I think maybe if you feel it's not really like a safe situation that you're in, maybe making some compromises. There's nothing wrong with that. I think if you're thinking, oh no, I can't do this because it's sinful, or I can't do this because it's Islam says it's wrong. Making compromises in the beginning, just so you can make your environment a bit safer. Then I think that there's nothing wrong with that. And take your time with Islam as well. Don't rush into things. Just take your time with it. Because I think you can get burnt out if you try and apply too much to yourself all at once. I remember once my dad asked me to come to the pub with him. At the time I did go in there with him. I had a Coke, and he really appreciated the time that I spent with him. Some people could say that was a compromise. Some people would say it wasn't. At the time, I thought that was the right thing to do, because that's where he spent most of his time when he was relaxed, and he was in an environment that to him was comfortable. Go easy on yourself. Don't be too harsh on yourself and on your parents. At the end of the day, they're your parents, and they love you, and they want what's best for you. And I think the only reason why they get upset and they get shocked is because they don't want you to get hurt. So, it's important to remember that and keep that relationship with them.
Hanan, how about you? Have you managed to think of anything?
Yeah, well, I had to say, well, maybe getting a mentor. This I had to say that, isn't it?
Plug it.
Yeah, plugged it. Because we didn't have those things. And I think those of us who have been Muslim a few years realize the importance of that. And, and also not taking your knowledge from everywhere, like Sheikh Bilal said, seek out authentic knowledge. And I think that is a bit easier to do now, in a way, when it's not just a few pamphlets. I mean, there's a lot on the internet. However, there are good organizations and sound organizations. And also, if you, and I'm not saying like search around for an opinion you like, but if something does sound really wrong and it doesn't resonate with you, then maybe that isn't the place for you. And I remember a friend of mine saying that her dad used to say to them that if something doesn't make sense, then it's not Islam. And I thought that was quite nice. I mean, obviously, there are sometimes we don't understand everything. However, if something sounds really ridiculous, then maybe, there's been a mistranslation there, or maybe it's something very cultural, or maybe it's a spurious practice.
Absolutely. I think my best advice to people who are struggling with their parents is to have empathy for where your parents are coming from. And like Brother Hamza said, in most cases, I'm saying this with the caveat that it isn't always this, but for most families, they're worried about us. And it's from a place of deep love and concern that they are locking horns with you. Chances are they've never, like we were all saying, I mean, a few of us had family members who knew Muslims and a few of us didn't. If they were like my parents and had never met a Muslim in their lives, and I'm still really the only Muslim my mother knows, other than her grandkids, it's hard for them. And it's hard for them to understand it. And for us, I was looking into Islam for something like 2 years before I actually took the plunge and converted. But for my parents, it was an overnight thing. It was suddenly 1 minute I was Amanda who liked to go out partying, and the next minute I was Amanda who was praying and wearing a scarf on her head. And that just seemed really strange to them. And I, in hindsight, should have had more empathy for that. So having empathy for your parents and where they're coming from, and recognizing that it is usually a place of love, that they're locking horns with you.
So the next question is, what advice would you give to family members of converts who may be struggling? So this is
that the family members are struggling.
Families, yeah. Maybe just one quick piece of advice. I would say to family members that, especially parents, your son or daughter, they're still your son or daughter. They've not become a different person, overnight because they said the Shahada. So they're still your son and daughter. They're not, morphing into this completely different person. And, Islam, if it is not making them a better person, then you need to be worried. But if it is making them a better person, then you should accept that and be grateful of that.
I think, Bilal, you've put it very, very well there, I'd say.
Yeah. One thing that I have said to my mum is that me becoming Muslim wasn't despite how she raised me. It was a natural conclusion of how she raised me, because she raised me with morals and ethics. And now she sees that Islam is about morals and ethics. Maybe at the start she didn't. So I think if there's any parents out there who are sort of like, what am I going to do? My child's become a Muslim. Really, it's not the end of the world, and try and be still part of your child's life and look into what it is they're practicing. Go to the mosque with them, go to Eid prayers with them, see what it's all about. You might be surprised. And it's not about trying to get you to convert as well, because we all recognize that that's not how it works. People don't convert just because they go to an Eid prayer, but go and see what it's about. And you'll probably be really, really pleasantly surprised that it's not what you think it is, that it is, the community is very much about family and community and so on. And I'm grateful that my mum has come to realize that now, although I still can't get her to go to an Eid prayer because it's way too early in the morning, but I'm working on that.
What I was thinking was that it's actually very hard for us to give advice from, to somebody who hasn't experienced that. I think the best advice would come from somebody whose son or daughter have converted. It's a shame, maybe inshallah in the future we can, have somebody on to know their perspective, because when we're talking now, I'm realizing that I haven't really sat down with my parents and said, how did you feel? I've apologized. I've apologized for my, some of my things when I didn't come down and visit them at Christmas. And, bearing in mind, thinking about how much limited time that we have with our parents, and that there was only 2 siblings. And then if I didn't go and my sister didn't go, then there was no one with them at Christmas. I'm just horrified that I did that, just to not go and visit them, So I guess to keep dialogue open is always the best thing. And then just to be honest and open, which sometimes is hard because sometimes we're not open. We've just said we weren't as honest and open as we could have been, and we're asking them to be that. But maybe to say that, like Sheikh Bilal said, that they're still the parents, we're still the daughters. I mean, they're still the parents. So we hope that their wisdom would be able to,
yes,
kick in.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Really hate to say this, but we've run out of time. Hanan and Hamza, do you have any last comments you'd like to make?
I just want to say thank you, Sheikh Bilal and Amanda for having me on this podcast. And I've really enjoyed it, and hope to be doing more chats with you in the future. God bless you and your families and all of the everyone there who's listening.
Well, I couldn't put that better. That was beautiful what you just said. But also just to say that it has made me think that I will go and speak to my parents, just ask them, because I might not get the chance, isn't it? None of us who might not get the chance to. My parents, alhamdulillah, are 81 and 76. So
Mashallah.
Alhamdulillah. Lucky to have them, but we should seize the day. And
inshallah, I think I'm going to do the same when I go and visit my mum. Thank you both for giving us your time today. As always, if anyone listening would like to know more about the issues we've discussed, or if you're struggling with the issues we've discussed, please do get in touch. You can send us a DM on social media. We are at Beginnings UK on Instagram, or you can email us on unplugged@beginnings.org.uk. That's it for another episode of the New Beginnings podcast. We do hope you enjoyed this episode. Please share on social media and with family and friends.
Yes, please do share and subscribe. We're on all major podcast platforms. Inshallah, we'll see you next time.
I look forward to it. But for now, thank you for listening.
Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.